feel a shift this evening as we remember the truth of who we are. Isn't it amazing how quickly we can forget and get caught up in all the stuff of life? I remember hearing that song in a chapel service when I was at Unity Village. It's so simple and so healing, just taking that in and remembering it again and again. So welcome to our new series for 2023, starting off, and many of us were at the Whitestone. Who was at the Whitestone last week? So we've got our new refreshed energy as we're moving forward with our word. And on Wednesday Night Satsang, we're returning to our roots and bringing you universal spiritual teachings that align with unity or from different path. This particular one that we're going to be moving forward on this journey is Jack Kornfield's book, The Wise Heart. Jack Kornfield is my meditation teacher who trained him, Robert Brummett. And so he's like my granddaddy meditation teacher. And I love Jack Kornfield. I've done online courses and things with him. He's just so inspiring and so relatable, and just really thought it'd be perfect for this experience that we're sharing on Wednesday nights. So this book is using universal teachings of Buddhist psychology as a path for us to discover our unlimited capacities for extraordinary love, freedom, joy, and communion with all life. That sound good? Yes. Yes. So we begin with this question. My question for you is, who are you really? Who are you really? We return to that question as the basis of really any spiritual teaching. Whenever we begin a new series, it seems like that is the key question, that is the foundation of which we build upon, is remembering who we are really. And how we approach our lives depends on how we answer that question for ourselves, right? Last month I shared a story about a Buddhist temple in Thailand that had a statue of the Buddha that was covered in clay. You may remember that, for 500 years. And the monks had forgotten that this statue was covered in clay. They put the clay on it to protect it from warfare, and because it was very precious. But they just completely forgot that the gold was under there until 500 years later. It started to crack. They needed to repair it, and they looked in, and they were amazed. They were amazed. And our spiritual path is so much like that, isn't it? We put our armor on. What is that armor for you? Whatever came up in your life that was to protect you from fear, from harmful people, from insult and injury, whatever it happened to be, we put our armor up to keep ourselves safe, because innately we know we're precious. We know there's something to be protected. And what happens is we start to believe, like these monks believed, that the clay Buddha was the Buddha, that was their Buddha. And we believe that this armor, this protection is us, this personality, and we start living from it. The protective layer, the defensive layer. Noted Jungian analyst Robert Johnson says we're more likely to take our shadow traits, as what Jung would call them, to be who we are. Our worst fears, our worst thoughts about ourselves. That this is just common in the human experience, to think that that's it, that's who I am in this lifetime. And Johnson says that people naturally resist our noble traits, that it is more disturbing to find out that you have a profound nobility of character than to find out that you're a bum. Isn't that amazing? We much more easily believe that we are worthless rather than fully worthy. So that's why we come back in unity again and again to remind ourselves, because the world will give us evidence to the contrary if we listen to those kind of voices that are out there. The very first principle of Buddhist psychology is to see the inner nobility and beauty of all human beings. and unity, this is a lot like our second principle that Reverend Michael is going to be speaking on this Sunday. The first principle being that did anybody remember the first principle from Sunday? Remember? Guys, there's only God, right? Just God. God is everything, everywhere, in everyone, as all things, right? So in Buddhism, they don't get distracted with anything out there. They really focus more on the inner divinity experience. And that's something that as unity teachings were evolving, as our founders were studying all the great religions, that from the Eastern tradition, this awareness of the inner divinity is something that they said this is a universal spiritual truth, and this is going to be the foundation of our teachings as well. So I invite you to affirm with me, I see the inner nobility and beauty of all human beings together. I see the inner nobility and beauty of all human beings. Breathe that in. So in order to do that, to see that in others, we begin with ourselves, right? Always comes back to doing the work yourself so that you can do it with other people. Jack Kornfield shares that the frightened and damaged self is not who we are. Breathe a sigh of relief there. It's not who we are. It may not have been easy for you to know your own goodness in your family of origin. That's usually where we begin to develop the armor, the shield, the clay, whatever it is for you. He shared, this is the first time that I knew about his family of origin experience, and I related to it myself, coming from a dysfunctional family situation. For Jack, he had an abusive and raging father and a mother who was bruised and frightened. And he never knew when he went on a family vacation if his dad would slam his mom's head against the windshield, if there was somebody cut him off in traffic, if he would take it out on his boys. He had 4 boys, and at that time, his mom was told, you stay together for the sake of the kids and that kind of thing. And so this abusive behavior just kind of kept going on. And even though this was happening, Jack knew inside him, without anyone telling him, that there was more to life than this. That this unhappiness was not all that he was available to him and that he could experience. And he imagined, as many children do, in situations like this, that one day, maybe, a gentleman would come knocking on his door and say, you and your brothers were left here because you had to be taken care of by this family, but we're going to take you back. Your parents really are the king and the queen. So, what a wonderful idea of his nobility, that there was a rightful family that was kind and loving and saw the truth of who he was. He said out of this fantasy that he had as a child arose one of the strongest currents in his life, which was to be a part of something worthy and something true. And so he sought that and sought that and sought that until he ended up in a monastery in Thailand studying these Buddhist teachings. He was seeking his real family of noble birth. And so we know that in unity, that we are children, and now adult children of God, right? Our birthright is our divinity. And so we are a part of a noble family. And we know that we can only really know that truth through spirit, through an inner awareness of coming to that realization. Original goodness is not just an uplifting phrase. It's a process that we go through, and to realize this goodness, and through realizing this, we transform the world by practicing it. So it doesn't mean that we ignore the problems in the world, that we ignore people's sorrows. It's actually quite the opposite of that. And it also doesn't mean that we don't have good boundaries with unhealthy people. We want to make sure that people who are unstable, violent, that we don't leave ourselves vulnerable to them. We use our wisdom and judgment, good judgment in that. But to find the dignity in others, we must acknowledge their suffering, their humanity in their experience. The most central of Buddhism's psychological principles are the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is that suffering is an inevitable part of life. It can be hard to talk about this in modern culture because we have a tendency to bypass, to want to just cover that over, to not talk about it, to avoid difficult conversations and discomfort at all costs. Yet, we know when we're suffering how good it feels to be seen, and for someone not to just say, oh, you'll get better, or that's no big deal, or whatever, to say, to see you in the suffering, to acknowledge that it can be refreshing and really helpful. I just finished a Netflix series. And I was watching that. I fell in love with Harry and Meghan. You watch that? And I love it. And what was really interesting about it is you see these people that all, you would just think, okay, they've just got it all. They're rich, they've got power, they've got money, they've got influence, they've got everything. And yet you see the suffering, and particularly for Meghan, the way that she was attacked by the press and the racism that she experienced, that I don't want to spoil the series for you, but you can see that it had a really challenging impact on her life, which is why they left the royal family. That's not a spoiler. You know this, right? That they moved to the States, and anyway, there's more to that. But the series was great in just really getting an honest human look at their life and what they faced, in which you would think, oh, what a perfect life, anybody would want that, but for them there were a lot of challenges. So is first really acknowledging there is suffering in human life for everybody. No one's exempt from the suffering. And the second noble truth is that there is an origin to the suffering. It's called dukkha. That's the word that is used in Buddhism. And dukkha is basically whatever we're experiencing that is dissatisfying to us. That's a real basic understanding of it. Jack Kornfield says it's the forces of greed, hatred, and delusion in the human psyche. Really, all that comes down to is what we're having a problem with. Anything we're having a problem with is causing us suffering, right? While we need to tend to our suffering, we don't want it to overshadow our fundamental nobility. That's an experience. It's temporary, and it's not the truth of who we are. The word nobility doesn't refer to kings and queens. I just assumed that was the definition of that word. It actually comes from the Greek word know, G-N-O, like the word gnosis, know. And the meaning is wisdom or inner illumination. In English, we define this word as human excellence, that which is illustrious, admirable, lofty, and distinguished in values, conduct, and bearing. So it's not about your social status, about the truth of you being fully realized, that full realization of self, which is what we are on a spiritual path to realize. So how do we connect this quality of nobility to realize it in those around us? Well, really, no one can tell us. We know no one can tell us how to love, and so no one also can tell us how to know and experience the divinity of each person, it takes practice and an intention to do so. And Jack Kornfield gives us a few suggestions. The first one that he gives is to imagine that person as a small young child in their innocence and their vulnerability. It's very easy to see this in a sleeping child. My daughter, she's almost 7, and just when I see her sleep, and she's just perfect angel. And so you just picture that person, whoever it is, or everybody, just as this perfect angel, peaceful and sleeping and beautiful. So that's a way to see the nobility. And others, another way is to move forward in time in their life and to imagine them at the end of their life, on their deathbed, vulnerable, open, nothing to hide. If you've seen people in the last stages of life, then you know really they're just present. The defenses have been lowered. You can also see them as a fellow traveler on the journey, that beneath their aggressions, their fears, they are just like you, just like you. They have a tremendous potential for compassion and understanding, and whose goodness is present. Sometimes what's helpful for me in seeing the goodness or the nobility in someone is to think of them when I first met them. Like if there is a part of our relationship that isn't working, that usually when you first meet someone, there's warmth, there's friendliness, there's a connection. So sometimes that can help if there's a kind of a personal relationship to return to that. But he gives us different options and just invites us to experiment and see what works for you. Maybe different things will work with different people. But whatever you can do to return to that awareness of the innate goodness in each person, and especially those that you may struggle to see that with. It's very easy to see nobility in the people who are our world's great moral leaders. Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and we honor him, and it's so easy to see how he showed up as love and light and in service. Nelson Mandela, when he walked out of prison, he didn't walk out in anger and resentment. He walked out with a spirit of courage and dignity after 27 years of torture and hardship. We can see this same kind of spirit in healthy children. Spend time with children. You can spend time with my kid at church and see how she's just so full of joy, and there's just a natural beauty. And all the kids here, of course, all children who are, in a healthy spirit. They express Buddha nature, and they allow us to awaken to our Buddha nature when we see it and we remember it, remember that light. The Buddhist teachings reveal that inner freedom is available to us in any circumstance in life. And he gives this great example of Viktor Frankl, the wonderful psychologist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. He was the only person in his family to survive. And what he shares is that in spite of the great suffering that was happening all around him, that he found a path to healing, that even in the worst possible situations, you can find a path to healing. And he wrote this: "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." And so that's our choice in any moment, any circumstance, to choose our own way. And when we're going through the worst crisis of our lives, the pain can seem absolutely endless. But the Buddha assures us that even in that, freedom is possible. And the Buddha's teachings say, if it were not possible, Buddha said this, if it were not possible to free the heart from entanglement in unhealthy states, I would not teach you to do so. But just because it is possible to free the heart from entanglement in unhealthy states, do I offer these teachings? So they're really for us who are in the process of healing and moving into greater awareness of wholeness. And seeing the nobility in others is a path of healing for all people. Thomas Merton, the famous Trappist monk, he practiced seeing nobility in others. He said, then it was as if suddenly I saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in the eyes of the divine. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. I suppose the big problem would be that we would all fall down and worship each other. Could you imagine? It would be beautiful. This is a shift from human perception to sacred perception. Sacred perception. It allows our hearts to resonate with each other. The teachings of heart math tell us about that our heart has resonant vibrational energy. If there is it's like if there's a violin in a room and somebody starts playing violin, that the strings of the unplayed violin actually vibrate with the violin that's being played. Our hearts are like that. If somebody walks into the chapel and they're coming in and they're all angry and disturbed, we're all going to feel that. There's some different shift in the energy. We can feel that. People who walk in peace, we feel that. And that can bring us peace. We are connected with each other vibrationally. And unless we're mindful, this mind state of another person can overtake ours. So we can create a resonance for others, a resonance of admiration, of respect for each other, when we practice the simple act of namaste. Namaste. We sing namaste at the end of the service every week. And it's a practice that they do in India all the time. People see each other, they put their hands together, they bow, and they say namaste, which means I honor the divine within you, which is different than our Western practice of handshake or, might be a fist bump or something. But the traditional handshake, which really, Jack Kornfield says that's more of showing that you're coming and you're in peace, like you're a safe person, you're not holding a weapon. It's a friendly handshake. But this is beyond just a simple handshake. This is not saying more than I will not harm you, is saying I see that which is holy in you. It's a spiritual act. And he closes this teaching, and I'll close my talk tonight with one of the most radical visions for the world that will transform everyone that you touch, is recognizing the innate divinity, the goodness in each other, and knowing the freedom of heart that is available wherever we are. Namaste.
Namaste.